This is Aviv with Aviv Consulting, and I'm the author of Create New Futures and the president of my own strategic innovation company, Aviv Consulting. And today we're going to talk about how to escape the collective stupidity syndrome and how to discover and engage and embrace the most critical currency of leadership, that is conversation. That conversation is the currency of leadership. And we're going to also explore with Dov this idea of create new futures and how can you, with your team, with your organization, create new futures for you and for your business. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to help you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? Do you think it's possible to produce breakthroughs and transform the world through a different quality of conversation? If so, how? Well, stay tuned. You're about to find out. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes on Facebook by finding Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. Just search it out on Facebook. You'll find us. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant. So please get over there. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. We are all the way from Tampa, Florida to Boulder, Colorado, and even up by the FBI in Quantico, Washington, D.C. You can also look for us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you are a regular listener, a big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Did you know you can also catch us on Spotify, Google Home, Alexa? Simply say, play Dov Baron Podcast. Again, I want to thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. We really appreciate it. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. When you look at leadership and what it actually is, we all know that it's changed. But how has it changed? How has it changed? Is there a way to create a new reality around leadership using the quality of your conversation as a leader? We used to think that leadership was about barking orders. We used to think it was about command and control. But listen, even the military has changed that. So is it time for us to change the quality of our conversations in order to change the reality of leadership? Well, let's find out together. My guest on this episode is Aviv Shahar. Aviv Shahar is the founder and president of Aviv Consulting, a strategic innovation consultancy, and the author of Creating New Futures, How Leaders Produce Breakthroughs and Transform the World Through Conversations. Fortune 500 companies hire him to help their senior teams create purpose-inspired futures and innovative strategies that drive growth. Aviv's clients include, wait for this, executives at Alcoa, Chevron, Cisco, DuPont, General Mills, Lufthansa, Procter & Gamble. I mean, honestly, the list goes on. He's worked with clients in Brazil, in Canada, China, Germany, Great Britain, Holland, India, Israel. It goes on and on and on. And of course, the United States. With more than 25 years, Aviv has specialized in helping executives and managers enhance their creativity and innovation, competence and collaboration, clarity of vision. He is a master at what he does. And he comes from a background of being a fighter pilot of one of the most responsible for training fighter pilots in the Israeli Air Force. Aviv is a member of the $1 Million Consulting Hall of Fame. His work has been published in Forbes, Huffington Post, The Futurist, as well as other books and publications. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Aviv Shahar! And the crowd goes wild, young man.
Great to be here. Thank you, Dov.
It's good to have you, man. I appreciate you being here. It's about a year ago since we first had our conversation about you being on the show. It took a while. You're a busy boy. I'm a busy lad, but we made it happen. So let's jump in. One of the questions I like to start with is, you know, in a world where we are inspired by, particularly now in the social media, there's always new images thrown at us to put faces that say, oh yeah, that's who I aspire to be. But one of the things I know about great leaders is very often they have been influenced by somebody in their life that most of us wouldn't know. Who is someone that we likely wouldn't know who's been a major influence in your life?
Well, let me give you four.
Thank you.
The first would be my father, who escaped Europe during the Second World War. 3 of his brothers and sisters and parents went down in Auschwitz. And he is the kind of person that always fell on his feet. And when I do with leaders, from you I have learned exercise, which is you talk about people that influenced and shaped who you are as a person and who you are as a leader, I always begin with him because I've learned from him about resilience and about courage and about pragmatic response to any challenge that faces you. The second person you wouldn't know about, because I don't even remember his name, is the heart specialist that told me when I was 7 years of age that I shouldn't exert myself because of a heart condition. And I got so scared. And on the bus ride back home to the kibbutz where I was born and raised, I told my dad, you know, that's not going to be, I'm going to run free. And I started running because I was so scared. 4 years later, I won the long distance running champion for Israel for my age group. And oh, by the way, in the process, I healed my heart. I didn't consciously know at the time that that's what I was doing, but something inside rebelled. This was the point in my life where the spirit of defiance was welling up in me with tears when I first got that message. But he was a formative influence, and I can't even remember his name because he never looked me in the eye when he told my dad that I shouldn't exert myself. Back then, doctors didn't know you need to actually create rapport with children, with toddlers. So here's the second.
So let me just pause you there because that's an important one, and we can certainly come back to it. But that second one, so he was a major influence because of that part of you that needed to give him the middle finger.
That's right.
Because I think this is one of the things that people don't realize is, you know, I was having a great conversation with somebody the other day, and I talked about how that defiant spirit is oftentimes at the root of leaders. And he says, yeah, one of the things that he's learned from insanely successful people is they let the hate innovate. They take that anger and turn it into something that is powerful to shift people. And you did it with yourself. So that's powerful in and of itself.
It's one of those moments that you and I and many of the people listening to us experience throughout their life and their professional career. You reach a point that you can either be frozen by fear, or you're gonna fight that and actually let the spirit of defiance rise from within. The third influential person was my chief instructor in the Air Force in the operational training unit, who always used to preach to us, you don't need to fly outside the training envelope. And when 6 months after I finished the operational training unit, the Air Force is playing the war games. I am scheduled to be in my formation. We are scheduled to fly at about 11 a.m. and an hour earlier there was a crash. And quickly there is a wire coming through. and we knew which wing unit it was, and we quickly found that it was my chief instructor. Here you had a beautiful person, a person that, wonderful family, 2 kids, all gone in a second. And it would take a while, but we will find out quickly that he was flying very low in a mountainous area. All you need is a split of a second to lose focus, and you crashed. And he was too competitive on that. So, but I was young. This was a bravado culture. I suppressed it, and the show must go on. You now move 15 years later, Dov, and I am doing the work I started to do with leaders in the mid-90s. And I committed to go through my life and scan moments that I didn't fully process and unearth the learning potential and the qualities that I could harvest from that experience, such that it will become a teachable message to the people that I work with. And I committed that when I do the story circle exercise with leaders, that's following the Native American tradition of storytelling, that I will share sometime that story to honor his teaching to me, because, and the way we practice this story circles is you got to tell the story, but then you have to harvest what's the moral of the story, what's the teachable message. And I describe when I tell the story that when you don't practice what you preach, when you fail to walk your talk, sometime it will cost you your reputation. In the worst case scenario, it will cost you your life. And so I'm never perfect. I fall on my face. I make mistakes. But I try as hard as I can to remember that. And I tell the story to communicate it to others as much as to remind myself, because I need to remember it myself every day when I get up. Can you work hard to walk your talk and practice what you preach?
And that's powerful, because so often, like you, I work with high-level leaders, and so often there is almost a mulligan, I think is the term in America. There's a mulligan to the leader. Well, it's no, hold on a second. They can give you a mulligan, but you can't give yourself one. You have to hold yourself accountable, because leadership is about impact. It's about influence, and you are always impacting and you're always influencing. And if you are saying this but doing that, what they say is, okay, I got to follow the rules until I get to that position. Then I can do whatever the hell I like, and I don't have to follow my own guidelines. And I love that I'm the same thing. I do the same thing. I tell my story of falling, not so that people will go, ooh, but to remind myself, I fell on my ego. Right? So keep that ego in check, Dov, because I'm not interested in falling 12 stories anymore. So I love that you pointed that out, that this is a story you tell for you to hear as much as it is for them.
And what I appreciate about the way you framed that is what you pointed to there is what you and I call the integrity gap. So 25 years ago, you could get by in the corporate space. Today, no way. I actually like to say to clients, consider that everybody working for you is highly psychic and clairvoyant. If there is a gap, not between what you say and what you do, if there is a gap between what you think and what you say, they pick up on it right away. So you better do the inside out, the inward work of a leader, or else people will recognize and will feel the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. And your fourth one, you had 4.
The fourth one is somebody I always talk about when I talk about the 4 approaches to leadership development when you scan the last 40 years. And that's Benjamin Franklin. Let me quickly position the 4 zones of leadership development, because I know people listening to you, they come here to learn about how to develop as leaders. So I draw a 4-quadrant framework, and I say that the 2 on the right are the 2 approaches that are outside in, and the 2 on the left are the inside out. Let me start on the right side, on the outside in. On the upper is what we can describe as the situational leadership development. That was popularized in the 80s and the 90s by Ken Blanchard. As we know, I've developed in the early 2000s a similar approach took the next step and called it adaptive leadership. That's essentially us training, coaching, developing leaders to walk into a situation, to have the acumen to appreciate, evaluate who are the people around you, and to customize your leadership style to their level of maturity and readiness. That's the situational or adaptive leadership.
Yeah.
That's the upper right quadrant. The lower right quadrant is what we see primarily is the dominant approach in the last decade or so, is what I call the outcome-based development to leadership, the outcome-based leadership. In the early days, used to be called objective or management by objective. We now expect leaders to lead to create outcomes. Don't tell me what you do. Don't describe your activities. Describe the outcomes you are creating. So those are the two zones on the right side. We actually need both. But when we go to the left side, on the lower left is what I call the competencies and skill skill development approach to leadership. So do you need to develop better analysis? Do you need to develop better skill in decision making? Do you need to develop better skill in coaching your people? We can focus on specific competencies, behaviors, and skills to help you develop as a leader. Now we come to the upper left, which, having listened to you on many conversations, I intuit that's where you come out of, and that's where I come out of. I call this the qualities development approach to leadership development. That's when we develop qualities, the core inquiry of which is the purpose inquiry. I've been on a 40 years journey of a purpose, the purpose inquiry, what is my purpose? How will I tell the story of my purpose? And probably that articulation evolved 20, 25 times over the last 40 years. But this is where I tell the story of Benjamin Franklin, because you made some important decisions earlier on in life, and I did as well, Dov, and I made some important decisions when I was 16 and 17. So I was inspired when I read that Benjamin Franklin, when he was an esoteric man, he was actually not given the full credit of who he was. In age 16, 17, he codified those 13 qualities that he said will become the center of his character. And he knew something about character development, because he said, I will focus every week on a quality, do the math, 13 times 4 brings us to 52 weeks of the year. So essentially he committed to focus on each of the 13 qualities a week, a year, in each of the 4 seasons, to program, to print in himself, to become the exampleship, the model of these virtues, 13 virtues. Later in his life, towards the end of his life, he was asked, how is he doing? How was he doing with those 13 virtues? And he said, I think I'm doing pretty well with the first 12, which means I still have work to do in the humility bracket, in the humility bucket. So, but when I talk about, do you want to be a successful leader? It's not just about what you do outside. It begins with the work on the inside as you preach and teach to the people you work with. And I always talk about Benjamin Franklin because he, great innovator. People don't know his contribution to the innovation of electricity. He was the one to establish the first library and many other inventions are under his name. Let alone his unique contribution to the founding fathers in terms of shaping the story of America and the core values that shaped America. So that's the story about him and the 4 zones of leadership development.
The Benjamin Franklin thing for me, I think, is a great example because one of the things I'm very keen on having leaders look at is the multifaceted dimensions of a leader. Now, you've talked about these 4 quadrants, and those are rock solid and very important. And I would encourage anybody to go look at your materials and understand those at a much deeper level. And on top of that, I would say understanding oneself as a multifaceted individual, because we, as individuals, And we as a society like to see people through a single facet. So when people talk about Benjamin Franklin, they think about him as being one of the forefathers of America, right? But they don't realize that, hold on a second, he was an inventor. But hold on a second, he was into personal development, character development. He was esoteric, that he was philosophical, that he wrote philosophical material, and he understood philosophical material and studied philosophical material. And I think that all too often as leaders, we get pigeonholed, we pigeonhole ourselves into a single dimension, and we say, this is who I am. No, no, no. There are many facets to you. And so we go, oh yeah, well, okay, yeah, because in your case, because I was a fighter pilot in the Israeli army, and I was also an instructor. No, that's another facet, but there's so much more to you, and each facet adds to the whole. And so your training as a fighter pilot has helped you to become a better leader and a better leader trainer, but that's not just it, because there's also your father's resilience that impacted you. And I think this is something that we as leaders have all got to take a step back at and go, I loved what you were saying there, because I actually do that work with people who are going, look back at your life and what have you not processed? And people go, well, that's the past. And my answer to that is very simple. I want you to understand this. And they go, what? And it's like, your past is leaking all over your present and about to pollute your future if you don't process it. And how do you process it? You feel the feelings you didn't allow yourself to feel, number one, and then you extract from that what I say is the diamonds. You pull the diamonds out of that, which is the wisdom and the knowledge and the learning and the insights, which, so you and I are very much on par with that. And I love that you're encouraging that, because leaders want to say, well, that was the past, and I have to be focused on the goals, and I have to be focused on the future. There's more to it than that. It's a bigger picture. So thank you for that. That's a great insight.
If you don't allow yourself to become and to show up as the multifaceted human being that you are, you cut out tremendous amount of energy, tremendous amount of creativity and innovation, and you so much limit your potential to influence and create an impact. So why would you do that?
Yeah, but I think that, particularly those of leaders who are of a certain age, not an age that we, a certain age, grew up in the command and control world. And in the command and control world, one doesn't show one's vulnerability, because if you do, that's considered weakness. But you and I know that vulnerability, particularly with self, is where we get our real power from. As you said, when reminding yourself of your own need to check the stories and, what am I actually saying? It's very important. I want to jump on a bit, because I want to talk about the title of your book, which is Create New Futures. And there's two pieces I want to talk to you about this. Well, there's actually a lot more, but two I want to start off with, which is Create New Futures. Let's have you share with our audience why that title, for many leaders, that might seem like an unusual title. And why did you decide to not write chapters, but portals? Because I think that's another, in our previous conversation, that was another interesting piece that I think leaders need to grasp. So let's start with the title, Create New Futures.
Well, so the story goes that during the 1973 war, my father was the general secretary of the kibbutz where I was born and raised. Israel was that close to crumbling to the Syrian army. The only reason the Syrian army stopped in the Golan Heights was they didn't have any plans to get further into Israel. And he was facilitating and leading discussions every evening to help people process through the grief, the shock, the fear. And I saw that was the job of a leader. The job of a leader was to help people come to terms with the present, but ultimately open pathways to a new and different tomorrow. And I probably didn't have the same elegant words I'm using today. It was more visceral. It was more, the experience was codified into every cell in my body. So later, when I embarked on the work I started to do, I discovered that initially I came through the leadership focus. And why I came through the leadership focus? Because there was actually 20 years of transformational, developmental, spiritual journey that was more concealed, but that I made a determination to follow back from my early 20s. And when I said, okay, because I made a promise to my wife when we were in our 20s, I said, I will follow my passion and I will follow my heart. The material question, the financial question will have to be answered later as a follow through to that inquiry rather than the other way around. I didn't want to live the reverse life of people who spend the first 20 years, 20 to 40, chasing success, and then begin to, in their 50, ask about purpose and meaning. No, I said, give me meaning, give me purpose, give me significance on the front end. Success will follow through. So I started to translate this work into unique leadership programs that I was teaching all around the world and in North America. And then people around the 07, 08, 09 crisis, people said, can you do this magical thing you do with us and with teams, but also actually help us solve our business problems and build our strategy? So I said, yeah, sure. Because the right answer to any consultant or any coach is
yes.
When you ask the question that you have no idea how to address, is to say yes. Because when you say yes, you're not cheating anybody. You are actually summoning your creativity. And so one thing led to another. And in 2011, I was asked by the president of new business creation at Procter & Gamble to help them reimagine and re-engineer and rejuvenate their innovation engine and new business creation. I was at the time working with I think a friend of yours, Mark Levy, and he said, you are in the space of strategic innovation, and what you do is you help people create new futures. So that was the name of the book, and that was the tagline on the website. And the strange thing, the tagline was already in my email for 2 years, and I didn't even notice it when I was looking for the name of the book until I said, yeah, it's been there all along in front of my nose, and I was just too blind to see it.
Yeah, one of the things I love about Mark is you probably know of a particular, actually an Israeli engineer who wrote a book called The Elusive Obvious. You know that book?
No.
Okay, so it's by Moshe Feldenkrais.
Oh, you talk about Moshe Feldenkrais. I know a lot about Moshe Feldenkrais and about his method. We can talk about that and brain science and how it relates to us.
Yeah, I love Feldenkrais' work, and I read his stuff 30 years ago, I think. Phenomenal stuff. And just this is a tangent for everybody, so I'll just give everybody a context. This is an engineer who went into understanding the body and how the body works and how the body functions, and did a transformed healing for people by simply watching how they walked, was how he started. So phenomenal, interesting thing. But his ability to see what people can't see. And I think that this is what if we're good as a consultant, if we're willing to be fully present, it's to not go in with our preconceived ideas, but to pay attention and see what others cannot see. And oftentimes that's what we don't even know. As you said, it's to open up that divine guidance, that amazing creativity, and to tap into that, to be in the flow of that. And I'll often say to people, I'm in a company where I'm working, and I go, and they go, and somebody will, somebody's a bit pissy about it, and they'll say, well, what do you know about this industry? And I'll go, nothing. And they'll say, well, have you ever run a Fortune 500? Nope. Well, why are you here? I don't understand why you're here. You don't know about an industry, and you don't know about running a multi-billion-dollar company. And I'll go, you're absolutely right. And that's why I'm here. I don't have your blind spots.
That's right.
That's the problem, because we're all got blind spots about certain things. The best example I always have is Tiger Woods, brilliant golfer, fantastic. How many coaches did he have? 5. He had 5 coaches. He was the best golfer in the world, and he had 5 coaches teaching him golf. How many? Was he good? He was the best of the best. How many coaches did he have for relationships? 0. And what happened to his marriage? And how did he destroy his career? Because he didn't have a relationship coach. Because as you and I have always preached, it's in, not out. The golf was out. The marriage was in. And that's why this is so important.
The one line addition to what you're describing there about Moshe Feldenkrais and the method is that actually it dovetails beautifully to what you said about blind spots. The method is based on the idea that the brain, by design, will look to find the most efficient pathway.
Yes.
But because of trauma, because of other experiences, the way we organize our movement and posture is one where we selected an inefficient posture, which is what introduces pain and so on and so forth. So the method, when they work with you on what is called functional integration, actually is not a body work. It actually is a work on the motor cortex in the brain to introduce options. The practice and the theory being that when you introduce to the brain new options, the brain will intelligently select the most efficient option. And that's what you and I do when we work with people to facilitate their emergence and their discovery. We're not telling them what they should do. We help them to discover other options. I often say that one of the core premises of trusted advisory for CEOs and senior executives is to explore and expand the range of options so that they can better select, because people are too lazy. And when they're faced with a problem, they often react to the first or second idea that comes up. And a big part of my advisory work is about expanding the range of options. What else could you be doing? How else could we think about this problem? What would you be doing if we stepped back and looked at it from a whole different vantage point? All that is part of that work actually into people's mind and subconscious mind to facilitate discovery and growth.
Yeah, I'm so with you. And as I said, one of the things about, you were just saying it earlier, one of the things that I love about my dear friend Mark Levy is that he is a master at seeing the elusive obvious, because that's how we actually ended up on that tangent. Mark is masterful at seeing the elusive obvious. And this is, again, because of the blind spots. We don't see things. And Mark is very good at that, and again, that's why he's a consultant to the very best, people like Aviv, and Dov. He helps us as well as being a friend. He's that's part of his genius. And I think that we've all got to, what I know about great leaders is they're not afraid to go, I've probably got a blind spot about this. Let's see if I can get to give me some insight. That's, for me, that's so much a great leader today versus yesterday.
If I may, let me use this as a segue to your other question about conversation, because it's right there in what you just framed, in the idea of do I think that I need to have all the smart ideas, or am I ready to be vulnerable enough to engage people who are different to me and see what I cannot see? So when I started working with senior teams, one of the troubling observations that I made was that you can often be at the table with a group of very smart people, only to discover that they are perfectly capable of delivering mediocre results and actually producing collective stupidity. And I ask,
please say that again, because that was beautiful. And I really want people to get that, because very often we go, oh yeah, but these people are so smart.
Right. You will often be at the table with brilliantly and smart group of people, only to discover that they are as capable as any other group of people in producing collective stupidity. And the question is why? Why so? I wanted to diagnose the problem, and I wanted to bring a solution to the problem, because something not only was annoying, it was physically painful for me to see and experience the stupidity that was going around. And some of the greatest disasters in corporate and organizational history, if you track down what is the story, what is the underlying story, we produce collective stupidity. Well, it so happened that the reason we produce collective stupidity is we first don't listen to each other. Second, we get entrenched in our own positions and keep saying the same things because we don't listen to each other. And third, we mix up different levels, the tactical and the strategic, the pragmatic and the innovative. We don't know how to choreograph effective conversation agenda. And so I decided that I have to find a way to address that. And one of the questions that I started asking leaders was, what is your highest point of leverage as a leader? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'd have leaders say, well, my highest point of leverage is I own the budget. I get to determine the resource allocation. And I say, yeah, that's right. That's nice. But what's a higher level of leverage than that? And he said, well, I get to set the mission. And I said, it's a good answer, but it's only 8 out of 10 or 8.5 out of 10. I play the riddle game because that's how you get the right idea engraved in the brain. So I said, how do you use your mission? And we would go back and forth, and he will finally say, if he said, well, the mission is something, the mission and the values, they must be part of the ongoing conversation. We reflect on those every day. And I said, that's the right answer. As a leader, your highest point of leverage is that you get to shape the conversation agenda. And the reason why that makes such a difference, once we embrace the idea that as leaders, we get to shape the conversation agenda. Well, number one, we will get up in the morning and we will make sure we never let the conversation loop get broken, because many leaders think, as you said earlier, it's just one-way communication. That used to be the command and control piece. No, conversation is a complete loop. So if you are leading conversations, the conversation loop will not be broken. That's number one. Number two, in business and in leadership, measurements are so important because, you know, we inspect and measure, and that's the way we get results. If conversation is the currency of leadership, we have to begin to measure something new. How effective is your conversation? How effectively were you able to lead from point A to point B? And you get them to walk into the room and ask, are we in the right conversation? Or should we be in a different conversation? And by the way, if we are in the right conversation, are we approaching it in the right, most effective way? Or should we re-architect the conversation? And finally, which goes full circle to the name of the book, Create New Futures. If we are in the same conversation we were in last year, well, by design, by definition, we will end up where we are today instead of actually lead to a new horizon. So creating new future and creating new futures in the various organizations we lead begin with shaping and creating new conversations. And that's the business that we are in as leaders. And so you and I, Dov, we help leaders lead transformational outcomes and create new futures. And the pragmatic beginning of that is, what is the conversation? What is the new conversation that you need to develop today to enter a new space, to enter a new synaptic space where you can begin to make new connections, where you can begin to see old problems in new ways and ultimately unleash new creative ideas.
I love that. I love that. There was something I saw years ago that inspired me. I think you know that one of the companies that we have is called the Authentic Speaker Academy for Leadership. We teach people how to become speakers and how to do storytelling and present their story in a way. And you know, it's on a circle, so you know, I'm sure there's a similarity to your process in that. But one of the things where I start off with is in helping people to understand. I say, you know, I once saw a short interview with Oprah, and she was talking about how her show, this was back in the days when she first started, she said her show was only about one thing, and that was what people would talk about in the car drive home. And I went, wow, that's important. Yeah. So it made me ask the question, well, what will people talk about? Will they talk about how smart I was? And I realized, yeah, they will. That's the wrong conversation. If they're talking about how smart Dov was, that's the wrong conversation. That's my ego. That's my leverage. Hold on a second. What do I want them to be talking about that's going to make their lives better? And that means they can argue and disagree with me. That's okay. And that was a really great piece for me to push my ego aside for a little bit and go, what do I want them to talk about on the way home? Again, the catalyst to conversation. Brilliant.
Three three codes in the little story you shared there. Number one is the laser focus in listening to an interviews. I do that as well. I'd listen to an interview with Robert De Niro or with Al Pacino, and he tells the story of how he was 76 times on stage and he still knew he was not understanding the Shakespearean play. And something unique happened in the 76 show, and he all of a sudden saw the play from above, and he understood the gestalt and understood the everything, and everything came together. And I tell that story when I talk about the journey to mastery, because he actually went through what I call the desert journey, which were the 75 shows where he was getting good reviews, but inside he knew he was still not fully there. And you know, I listened to Meryl Streep in an interview when she was asked once, what do you do when you're on set and you don't feel like in character? And she said, well, I remind myself how much they pay me and I'm immediately in character. So in your story, there's one line from Oprah that you internalized. The second thing, those escapes me, but I have a tidy mind and they will come back. So where were we going to lead next? It'll come back to me in a second.
So then what I was saying there was, you know, because you talked about the importance of directing the conversation and Oprah's message about that it was simply about what are people going to talk about on the way home. And that allowed me to put my ego to the side.
That's right.
I realized it's not about me. And I actually had thought, and I never thought about it. I studied ego. I studied psychology at a very deep level, and I understood it, but I didn't understand how it was creeping in. And so when you talk about choreographing and asking the question, are we in the right conversation here? And if we are in the right conversation, are we going about it in the right way and stepping back away from our biases to being in a different place? Aviv, I just want to say that I think it's so missed. Yeah, I think it's so missed, and it becomes, you know, we're still, even to today, we're still strategically focused, and we don't understand, particularly as we move into AI, it's going to become more important, not less, to understand the quality of a conversation. And how do we direct that?
The more we proceed into the VUCA zone of life and business, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, as the Army called it, the VUCA zone, the more we need to be attuned inside. And to your point there, my work is done not when I leave the 3-day workshop and people say how brilliant I was, but when I leave the 3-day workshop and they say, wow, I've been working with so-and-so for 15 years, but I've never seen him the way I've seen him in these 3 days. And I've never known how brilliant our team can be together. That's when my work gets done. When people tell me, you know, you may have saved us 6 months because you ask us questions we do not ask ourselves, and you allow us to surface conversations that otherwise will not surface. And not only that, we are then able to align and come to agreements and decisions that otherwise we will not arrive to. So that's how I view my work. It's about them. It's not about me.
Right. And we've got to remember that. And as leaders, it's so important. And I've always said that I think I can give a lot of answers, but my skill is in the ability to ask questions.
And the other thing that comes inside this, and this also plays very much to the kind of messages that you continue to teach through your podcast conversations and through your work, is I tell, and actually discovered with the people, my senior executive clients, the people they now hire are different to the people they used to hire.
Absolutely.
You used to hire people for what they knew. You now hire people for what you know they can learn tomorrow because of that VUCA world. And every person showing up in the work environment today, they have not one job, they have 3 jobs. Okay, they have their day job, which is whether you're in sales or in operation or you are in the purchasing group or any other department of the company, you have your job description, your day job. You've got to do the job. Doing the job is job one. But you have job two, which is transforming the job, which is looking at what you do and looking at it from another level and saying, how can I do this better? How will we innovate tomorrow? How will this work? Can be completely transformed. But then you have job three. Job one is do the work. Job two is transform the work. Job three is transform you.
Yourself, yeah.
Because if you don't transform yourself, you cannot do job one and job two at the highest level. So this idea that you show up to work and not just deliver on the metrics and the objectives, but actually engage with the challenges and opportunities and setbacks, and when we fall on our face and pick ourselves up, engage in that as part of the content of your job three. I'm here to develop myself. Unless you do that, you leave money on the table, your money on the table.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I was working with a leader recently who was saying that he has his own company, and he's saying, I'm thinking that, I'm kind of done. I'm a bit, I've been in this a long time, and I think maybe it's time for me to move into a new area. And I said to him, that's great. I'll support you in that in any way I can, but let me just have you take a pause. And he said, okay. And I said, I understand where you're coming from, but my question to you is this. If you're bored, what if you're not bored with the job and you're bored with you? What if you're not bored with the position, you're bored with you? And he said, what do you mean? I said, part of the challenge we have as human beings is we surround ourselves with people who think like us. We hear all this thing about all the time. I did a video about this last year where I talked about, surround yourself with like-minded people. And I said, that's a terrible piece of advice because you're never going to grow. If you're in a sycophantic bubble, you're never going to grow. You have to surround yourself with people who think differently than you. And that includes you. So what I challenged him to do is I said, if you step back and you were stepping into this job today, would you still be doing it the same way? And he goes, yeah, I guess. And I go, think about that for a minute. If I offered you the same job packaged differently, you might come in and go, oh, well, I do this and then I do that. Because that's how you think. You're a leader. You think, well, how can I make it better? But the problem is you're in the groove. And a groove is nothing more than a shallow rut. And a rut is nothing more than a shallow grave.
Nice one. There are actually two layers in what you're saying there. Let me distill this for listeners because you compacted a lot there. The first is that you have to find new meaning and new significance and new energy in the basic things you do.
Absolutely.
It's because you like to talk about doing the basic, but you have to revitalize, re-energize, rejuvenate yourself above the same good old thing, but for it not to be old, to be for it new. That's one layer in what you meant there. And then there is the other layer, which is pushing yourself, promoting yourself to completely new experiences, to actually challenge how you think, to provide yourself with experiences where you can expose blind spots and you can be innovated with new ideas, new thoughts. So the two layers in that idea of being new in yourself such that you are not bored with yourself. I think there's a Western perception that mastery means that I got it down so well that I don't have to think about it. And there's a wonderful martial arts teacher whose name slips my mind right now, who said, mastery is to do everything as if for the first time. Yeah.
And we look at it exactly the opposite. I've done it so many times. I've got my 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hours in, so I've got mastery. No. Can you approach it as if it's the first time? Because if you look at for me, little children have mastery because they approach everything with their wide eyes and the why and, the box is so fascinating. We're like, okay, throw the box away, put it in the recycling, let me get to the thing. And we miss so much. And that mastery of doing it as if it was the first time is what you were just saying about coming to it with fresh eyes is so beautiful. And there's that magnificent, as Campbell talked about, the beauty of naivety, just like a delicious naivety.
Well, and that deliciousness in the work that you do and in the work that I do, when we work with leaders, you actually have to step into that zone of emergence, zone of openness, where you become the conduit. If I only run on autopilot with my material, I miss the greater opportunity of what is the new collective intelligence that's about to emerge in this meeting. I often say that I walk out of my workshops probably with more learning than anybody else, because I'm interested in what's going to emerge through people, and I'm interested to listen inside. You know, Dov, I talk about four levels of listening with leaders, but actually I've never talked about it until this second. This is going to be first time, the fifth level of listening. So level one is when there is a conference call and you're actually multitasking. You're not listening. You're only all of a sudden hearing your name and you say, "Ooh, what are they talking about? I have to listen." Level two is cerebral listening. It's the attorney only determining to ask the questions of those that he knows the answer or she knows the answer for. That's very cerebral listening. Third level listening is when you listen to emotions and with empathy. But level four listening is what I call whole person, active listening, listening with presence. And that's when all the agendas recede in the background. Now there is level five listening, which you do, which I do. Level five listening is when I learn to listen in even deeper way inside me, to how I somatically feel in that occasion, and allowing the guidance and the collective intelligence. I know we're going a little metaphysical here, but that's all right on your show.
It is.
To actually listen to what's emerging, including to the new articulation that's emerging for me live on point, because that's why if I cannot be new and fresh on point right here, right now with you, what's the point? I'm just recycling old stuff.
Right.
And I'm interested in what can emerge in you. That's why leadership is actually being at the frontier of emergence, where we are at the edge of what we know, and we're prepared to embrace and engage new inputs with the people around us who bring other ideas and other processing inclinations to formulate the next new chapter of our endeavor together.
Very well stated. The challenge that's clear to me today is that we have leadership that's looking back. Making something great again is back. That nothing in evolution works backwards.
I did pick your subliminal message there.
I know you did, but you know, I mean, and by the way, you know, just so everybody understands, let's go to the Democrats for a minute, because obviously that was a talk about Trump. But the Democrats a minute, I'm seeing Joe Biden talk about things like we got to get back to normal. There is no back. I've just written a piece on this. There is no back. We have to move forward. And real leadership is actually about, as you said, shaping the future, creating a future by saying, hold on a second. You may not like this, but it is an evolution from what was. It may feel like a devolution, but it is an evolution because people are saying, I don't want that anymore. But they don't know what they want. And as leaders, we have to direct, choreograph, become the architects of,
that's right,
as you said, conversations that evolve us forward. And this is why I've loved this conversation. This has been wonderful. You and I could probably talk for another couple of weeks.
Let me quickly just capture, because it's too good what you just said there, about no back but forward. When I worked 10 years ago with a group of psychologists and practitioners to develop the resilience tool I used, the 5 pillars of resilience, the first thing we did was reframe and redefine resilience. Because resilience in the dictionary will say bounce back. In life, we never bounce back because the equilibrium completely shifted around you. So we redefine resilience as bouncing forward rather than bouncing back. And it's exactly the point you made.
Yeah. When I fell and I got smashed up and people would ask me, how are you doing? When I was still very much in my ego. In fact, I would say I was more in my ego after I fell. And people would say, how you doing? And I had my jaw wired closed and I'd say, I'm coming back. There is no back. Yeah. And it wasn't until I fell into a deep, dark depression that I had to face that fact. There is no back. and we're all looking back. And when you do that, Hitler talked about the pride of Germany coming back. Yeah, well, you know, we know how that played out. There's always and I think that as leaders, a major failing will be every time we're looking back and we say, well, let's get back to that. Let's get back to the days of Kennedy. Let's get back to the days of Reagan. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff back there you don't want to go back to. Let's move forward is vitally important. Aviv, I have loved this conversation. As I said, you and I could probably speak for a couple of weeks, and we probably will at some point because we don't live that far away from each other. And you got to come up here, or I got to come down there, and we got to hang out and have a cup of coffee, at least lunch, and because there's so much for us to share. However, we're going to move into a quick fire round before we close up. Okay, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay. What are you most curious about right now?
I'm curious right now how the 20-year-old and the 30-year-old, the multi-generational conversation can emerge. I'm fascinated. I've been extremely successful. I live a charmed life. I'm now curious and fascinated by creating cross-generational collaborations to help address the complex challenges that are on the world stage. Fantastic. That's awesome. What makes Aviv cry? Well, and I know you're a fighter pilot from Israel, and crying is not allowed. But what would make you cry? Well, it's the second and third piano concerto of Rachmaninoff, and it's the Schindler List theme played by Itzhak Perlman. And mostly with people, it's when I see an experience, the people that I love coming through a breakthrough and seeing their eyes, the glow, and the sense of emerging a new, that moves me to tears time and again. It's just, and in the work I do with people, when I see people break through in a new profound way. I definitely get that one. What is the music they will play at your funeral? Well, they may play the second movement of the Mozart Concertante Symphony, or the second piano concerto of Rachmaninoff. Or they may play something very cheerful. I don't know. I don't plan on getting there anytime soon in the next 40 years. What makes you cry laughing? You know, that would only happen probably with my wife around, because her laugh is just infectious. And typically it will happen when we are together with friends and we're actually immersed in many hours of the spiritual work that we do, and we're immersed in that presence of joy and splendor that we get intoxicated by, not alcohol, intoxicated by something else. And then you have not jokes, but spontaneous humor. Yes. Because you get to a point of seeing the ridiculous nature of our imperfections, and it's funny. It's funny to laugh at ourselves and at each other with deep endearment, and all is good and all is safe, and life is wonderful. Yeah, that's beautiful. In a parallel universe, what do you do? What's your job? Maybe I'm Meryl Streep in a parallel universe. You know, when I started blogging many years ago, I wrote a piece. Some people took offense to it. Are you a Meg Ryan or Meryl Streep? Was the head of that because of that post? Because essentially what I said was Meg Ryan was mostly the same character, and Meryl Streep was a different person in every movie. And you talked earlier in this conversation about being multifaceted. I am different people in different situations because they bring out of me different parts of myself. So I'm much more of a Meryl Streep than a Meg Ryan. But I do know that Meg Ryan has evolved since Sleepless in Seattle, and she is now many characters as well. So to give her her recognition, that was nice backpedal on Meg Ryan, particularly. Well, that was articulated initially 15 years ago. So I know, I'm just teasing you. As we finish up here, I always like to finish with asking my guests to offer one piece of practical advice, one piece of practical guidance that you can offer to our audience that
they can put into action in order to integrate this? As we always say, information is worth the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from application. So what is it that you want them to go away and do immediately so they can take in? Because what you've shared has been powerful and profound.
Well, the first thing is remember that life is not a dress rehearsal. This is the real deal, so you must do something about it. Secondly, remember you're not just a human being seeking spiritual experience, as wiser people than me said before. You're actually a spiritual being in this experience, seeking the human experience. And what that means is that you ought to be engaged with the learning process. And you therefore want to apply my 72-hour rule. My 72-hour rule says that when you listen to one of Dov's shows, there was a moment of epiphany during the conversation. Perhaps it's this conversation, perhaps it's another. And at that moment of epiphany, you enjoy what I call the 100% protein value of that learning nugget. And what you then have to do is you have to begin to take it through the 4 stages of adult learning, move it from I received the learning to validating the learning to the stage 3, begin to run water through the pipes, begin to apply it before the 72-hour window is out, or else you miss that window, because after 72 hours, that 100% protein value dissipates and comes down to below 50, with the gravitational pull of current conditions and the urgent and the busy activity completely consumes and overwhelms that epiphany you enjoyed an hour ago or a day ago. So you must do something within 72 hours, and you must move to some early step. And if I may sneak in one last thing, remember, as a human being and as a leader, you have 3 currencies. People often talk about one currency, but you have the 3 most important currencies, okay? It's not just time. You have, it's my ETF idea. I land many of my 3-day workshops with the ETF message. You have your energy, your time, and your focus. So many people give here advice on your show, fantastic advice, Tov, about how to find and shape their time. My message is, time without energy means not very much. And it's the way you choreograph and design your life and the focus you bring to your time such that you show up with energy that will make the highest difference, and especially to the learning you choose to apply and get to results. And then stage 4 of the learning is when you commit to teaching everybody in your environment about the one thing that you took from this conversation to make it an institutionalized knowledge end-to-end in your ecosystem.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. This has been a pleasure and an honor. Please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful resources you have, because there are plenty.
They can find Create New Futures on Amazon in all forms, Kindle and Audible, which I recorded with my beautiful Hebrewish accent. And they can find me on avivconsulting.com, and they can find there my podcast show, the same name as the book, Create New Futures. And they can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, by the same name, Aviv Consulting. And I'd be delighted to engage with your audience.
Wonderful. Again, it's been a pleasure and an honor, sir. I thank you. It's been really a gift. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes by going to Facebook and looking for Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. This has been an extraordinary show. I encourage you not just to listen in the background, which is so often what happens, but listen back a second, a third time. As Aviv just said, take the time to take in the learning, to let it get into every cell and every fiber, to taste the deliciousness of it and let it soak into your being, and then to put it into action, to share it with others. And part of our learning, one of the ways we learn best is by sharing what it is we've learned with other people. So share it and talk about how you can grow yourself and how you can grow your leadership from it. If you want to find out more about hiring me, Dov Baron, as your speaker or strategist for your organization, simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting, or to bring me in as a speaker, fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. Be aware that the research consistently shows that the fastest growing companies face exactly the same challenges as you likely do. They're spending time, money, energy, attracting, training, and developing top talent only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're frustrated with investing and training your and developing your talent only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. You can also stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix assessment tool. It's a way for you to assess the 5 areas of leadership for yourself. It's valued at $197. It's absolutely free to you for listening. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Until next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you are directing the conversations that are going on inside of your organization so that they are creating the new futures that will lead you to where you really want to go to. Are you listening with your heart, your soul, and your mind? Or are you listening to simply validate an old belief? I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the deep greatness that lies within you to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.